The neon glow of Chicago in 1992 was a sight to behold. But on one particular cold, rainy night, those vibrant colors painted a scene of deep, unsettling mystery. This is the story of Nathan Cross, a 27-year-old accountant who, one evening, simply walked out of his office and into thin air. It was a typical late night for Nathan. He was downtown, wrapping up reports, the kind of diligent work that defined his character. The city outside was slick with rain, streets reflecting the hazy bleed of traffic lights and storefront signs. Just another Tuesday, or so it seemed. Nathan started his usual walk home down Halsted Street, briefcase in hand, collar turned up against the persistent drizzle. Halsted was a familiar path, lined with the dark, sleeping faces of closed shops and shadowed doorways. But tonight, the familiar quiet felt different. It was a heavy, expectant silence, as if the entire city was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Around 11:45 p.m., as he passed a narrow, dark alley tucked between a grocery store and a bakery, a sound broke the stillness. It was faint, almost imperceptible, soft shuffle, like fabric brushing against brick. Nathan, ever cautious, stopped. He glanced back, his eyes scanning the empty, rain-slicked street behind him. Seeing nothing, he shrugged it off as just another city sound and continued on his way. A few people later told police they saw a man matching his description turn the corner onto 16th Street. But that was the last time anyone ever saw Nathan Cross. When midnight came and went, with no sign of Nathan, his roommate knew something was wrong. A call to the police set in motion an investigation that would quickly become one of Chicago's most baffling unsolved cases. Detective Laura Simmons was assigned to the case, and for her, it became personal. She dove into the sparse evidence with a relentless determination. Security footage from nearby businesses was a dead end. Most cameras were either off or angled uselessly away from the street. Only a single, grainy frame offered a tantalizing clue. Nathan, standing near the alley, looking over his shoulder. And behind him, a distorted shadow stretched across the wall, a formless darkness that defied identification. The mystery only deepened as Detective Simmons spoke to people in the neighborhood. Several residents reported strange occurrences that night. A black van, they said, had been parked near the alley for hours, its headlights flickering on and off intermittently. They'd heard muffled footsteps on the wet pavement, quick and furtive. But whenever anyone got close enough to investigate, the van was gone, vanishing as silently as it had appeared. Was this van connected to Nathan's disappearance? Or was it just another piece of the chaotic urban puzzle? By dawn, the area was a flurry of activity. Police officers and search teams descended on Halsted Street, combing every inch of the block. But their efforts yielded nothing. Nathan Cross had vanished completely. There was no sign of a struggle, no dropped items, no trail to follow. His briefcase, his coat, even his wallet all gone. It was as if the city itself, with its sprawling streets and endless shadows, had swallowed him whole, leaving not so much as a ripple behind. The investigators were stumped. Where do you even begin to look for someone who has disappeared without a trace from a busy city street? Theories started to fly, each one trying to piece together the fragmented clues. Was it a simple robbery that had gone horribly wrong? It was possible, but Nathan was known to be street smart. He wouldn't have easily fallen victim to a random mugging. Could it have been a case of mistaken identity in an abduction? Perhaps, but there was no ransom demand, no communication from any captors. Then there was the more chilling possibility, a premeditated disappearance. Had Nathan, for some unknown reason, decided to walk away from his own life? This theory didn't sit right with those who knew him. He was a man of routine and responsibility, not someone prone to impulsive, life-altering decisions. The clues just didn't add up. The faint shuffle in the alley, the mysterious black van, the blurry shadow on the security footage, they were like pieces from different puzzles, refusing to fit together to form a clear picture. Something, or someone, had targeted Nathan Cross deliberately. The precision and silence of the act suggested a level of planning that was truly terrifying. The city's noise and chaos, which usually provided a constant stream of witnesses and evidence, had in this case worked to conceal the crime, cloaking the perpetrator in anonymity. As the first rays of morning sun cut through the gray, overcast sky, Detective Simmons stood at the mouth of the alley. The rain had finally stopped, but the air was still heavy with unanswered questions. She stared into the damp, dark space where Nathan was last seen, the rain-soaked asphalt reflecting the pale morning light. "Where are you, Nathan?" she whispered into the cold Chicago air. She knew, with a sinking feeling, that finding the answer would be a long, arduous journey. The disappearance of Nathan Cross became more than just another case file. It became a local legend, a ghost story whispered on the streets of Chicago. It served as a stark reminder of how easily a person can be erased from the world, even in the heart of a bustling metropolis. Over the years, the case grew cold. Leads dried up, witnesses' memories faded, and the city moved on, burying the mystery under layers of new stories and new tragedies. But for Detective Simmons, and for Nathan's family and friends, the question mark always remained. The city of Chicago holds countless stories within its concrete and steel canyons. But the story of Nathan Cross is unique in its chilling simplicity and its profound lack of answers. A man walking home on a rainy night vanishes. It's a narrative that feels both cinematic and terrifyingly real. It forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth, that sometimes there are no easy explanations. Sometimes the darkness simply wins. And sometimes a person can just disappear, leaving behind nothing but a ghost of a memory and a mystery that endures through the decades. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into one of Chicago's most perplexing mysteries. What do you think happened to Nathan Cross? Share your theories in the comments below. And if you find these unsolved stories as fascinating as I do, be sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss an episode. Stay safe and see you next time. The morning after Nathan's disappearance, Chicago awoke to its usual symphony of city life. The clatter of the L train, the scent of fresh coffee from corner cafes, the relentless hum of traffic. But for the residents near Halsted Street, something was off. A strange, unspoken tension hung in the air, a quiet question mark punctuating the morning bustle. Store owners, wiping down their countertops, lowered their voices as they spoke of a black van, a phantom that had haunted the street the night before. Street cleaners, sweeping away the remnants of the night, noticed something peculiar. Wet footprints, too small to be Nathan's, too hurried to be casual. They seemed to dance erratically before vanishing near the gaping mouths of alleyways, as if swallowed by the shadows. Leading the charge was Detective Laura Simmons, a woman whose calm exterior masked a mind that never stopped turning. She orchestrated a thorough search of the area, a meticulous grid-by-grid combing of every inch of Halsted. Forensic teams like modern-day archaeologists descended upon the alley where Nathan was last seen. They examined the scarred asphalt, the silent street corners, the vacant lots that held their breath. At first glance, everything was just as it should be. But a detective's instinct is a funny thing. It's a nagging whisper that refuses to be ignored. And right now, Simmons's instincts were screaming. There, on the weathered brick wall of the alley, was a faint scrape. Barely visible, but there. A mark left by something, or someone, brushing against it in a desperate haste. The investigation radiated outwards, pulling Nathan's life into focus. Friends and co-workers were interviewed, each painting a picture of a man who lived his life by the book. Nathan Cross was careful, observant, a creature of habit. He was the kind of person who checked both ways on a one-way street. He didn't take risks, and he certainly never took shortcuts down dark, foreboding alleys. The consensus was unanimous, unless he was forced. Nathan would never have willingly walked into that shadow-draped passage. His routine was a fortress, his habits a shield that somehow had been breached. A breakthrough, or at least a flicker of one, came from the unblinking eye of a security camera mounted on a nearby diner. The grainy footage showed the street just moments before Nathan's familiar stride brought him into frame. Lingering near the alley was a shadowy figure, a silhouette against the city's glow. Its features were a blur of pixels, a ghost in the machine, but its movements were anything but random. It moved with a deliberate, unnerving precision, like a predator that had been studying its hunting ground for hours, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Simmons watched the clip over and over, the same few seconds looping into a haunting dance of fate. She made copies, distributing them to her team, hoping to put a face to the phantom. But in a city of millions, a ghost can be hard to catch. The chaos of Chicago, its endless stories and hurried pace, seemed to swallow every clue she chased. By the afternoon, the team's focus shifted, solidifying around a grim new theory: abduction. That black van wasn't just a figment of late-night paranoia. Reports had been trickling in all week. Witnesses recalled seeing it idling near restaurants and convenience stores, long after closing time, its tinted windows acting as a dark, impenetrable mirror, obscuring whatever, or whoever, was inside. It was a long shot, a needle in a city-sized haystack, but Simmons had always trusted her hunches. She decided to cast a wide net, dispatching officers to Chicago's sprawling network of pawn shops and known criminal hangouts. It was a grind, a slow and frustrating process of shaking trees and hoping something would fall. Ours bled into one another. The city transitioned from the golden light of late afternoon to the electric glow of evening. Most leads turned into dead ends, whispers that faded into the urban noise. But then a spark. A pawn shop owner on the south side, a man who'd seen it all, remembered something. A man, nervous and jumpy, had come in earlier trying to sell a briefcase. He described it in detail: worn brown leather, scuffed at the corners with distinctive brass clasps. The description was a near-perfect match for the briefcase Nathan carried to work every single day. The shopkeeper had turned him away, sensing something was off. But by the time police arrived, the man was long gone. Another fleeting shadow lost to the city. Night fell once more over Halsted Street, draping it in the same uneasy silence that had greeted Nathan just 24 hours earlier. The alley seemed to stretch longer now, the shadows deeper, darker, more menacing. Every distant siren, every rustle of trash in the wind, felt amplified, echoing the city's hidden anxieties. Simmons found herself walking the same path, alone for a moment with her thoughts. She stood at the mouth of the alley, studying the brick walls, the damp patches on the ground, listening to the faint, ghostly echoes of what had happened there. Something had happened here. She was more certain of it than ever. It wasn't random. It wasn't a mugging gone wrong. The calculated movements on the security footage, the targeted attempt to sell the briefcase, the sheer improbability of a man like Nathan straying from his path, it all pointed to one chilling conclusion. Nathan Cross hadn't just been in the wrong place at the wrong time. He had been targeted. He had been the specific destination for the darkness that night. As the city lights flickered around her, casting long, dancing shadows, Detective Simmons made a silent promise to herself and to the missing man she'd never met. She would find Nathan Cross. No matter how long it took, no matter how deep she had to dig, she would unravel the web of secrets hidden in Chicago's unforgiving night. But the shadows held their secrets tight, guarding them with a silent, patient resolve. And for now, every clue seemed to only deepen the mystery, pulling her further into the heart of the city's darkness. Thank you so much for watching. We're just getting started on this journey, and every clue brings us closer to the truth. If you're as hooked as we are, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single update. We'll see you in the next one. The next morning, Detective Simmons' phone rang. It was one of Nathan's colleagues. A small scuffed notebook had been found at a bus stop Nathan often used. The pages were damp from the previous night's rain, but what was inside sent a shiver down Simmons' spine. At first, it was just the usual stuff: work schedules, grocery lists, little reminders to himself. But as she flipped further, the margins told a different story. Scribbled in hurried handwriting were locations, times, and cryptic phrases. One entry in particular made her blood run cold. 16th Street alley, shadows move, black van, 11:45 p.m. The time matched the exact moment Nathan Cross had vanished. It was too precise to be a coincidence. Another note described a man in a gray jacket, always lurking near the alley in the evenings. None of the witnesses had mentioned him. It hit Simmons then. Nathan wasn't just a victim. He'd been an observer. He'd stumbled upon something, a pattern that everyone else had missed. Had he been targeted for paying too much attention? With the notebook as their guide, Simmons and her team descended on 16th Street. They retraced every step Nathan might have taken, re-examining the alley, the surrounding streets, even the rooftops, searching for anything that had been overlooked. The notebook was their new Bible, and its prophecies were starting to come true. They found faint scuff marks on the alley wall, right where Nathan's notes indicated. Someone had been there, moving in a hurry, but they'd left almost no trace behind. Then, the sightings of the black van started pouring in. It was always the same description. Unmarked, with heavily tinted windows. It would appear for a moment a phantom in Chicago's chaotic night traffic, and then vanish without a trace. No license plate, no logos, nothing to identify it. Its presence felt calculated, methodical, like a predator stalking its prey. Simmons knew this wasn't random. She spent hours interviewing local street vendors and late-night workers, anyone who might have seen something. A few recalled seeing Nathan, just before he disappeared, talking to a man in a gray jacket. They remembered him pointing toward the alley. The man had seemed calm, casual even, but the conversation had clearly unsettled Nathan. He had looked worried, glancing over his shoulder as he walked away. As evening fell over the city, the neon lights casting long, dancing shadows, Simmons felt a growing sense of unease. Chicago, usually so full of life, suddenly felt claustrophobic. Every alley seemed to hold a dark secret, every shadow a potential threat. The notebook in her hand felt heavier. It was a map, a trail of breadcrumbs left by Nathan. He had been trying to document something to follow a dangerous pattern, and it had led him straight into the lion's den. Back at the precinct, under the harsh fluorescent lights, Simmons spread out the pages of the notebook. She stared at the scribbled locations, the cryptic notes, the seemingly random observations. It was like trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing. But slowly, a terrifying picture began to emerge. Each location, each time, each strange phrase wasn't random at all. It was a trail leading into the dark heart of a conspiracy hidden within the city's streets. One thing was crystal clear. Nathan Cross hadn't just gotten lost. He had been observing something dangerous, something organized. And whatever it was, it had swallowed him whole. This was no longer just a search for a missing person. This was a hunt to uncover a calculated, hidden operation playing out right under their noses. The game had changed. The question was no longer just where is Nathan Cross, but what did he see? And as Simmons looked out at the sprawling city lights, she knew the answer was out there, waiting in the shadows. The real investigation had just begun. Thank you so much for watching. If you're as gripped by this mystery as I am, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter. We re-go in to follow Detective Simmons every step of the way as she dives deeper into this case. Let me know your theories in the comments below. See you in the next one. Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving deeper into the unsettling disappearance of Nathan Cross, a case that has gripped the city with its intricate web of secrets. Let's pick up where we left off as Detective Simmons plunges headfirst into the clues Nathan left behind. Simmons spent the entire next day poring over every single detail, every cryptic entry in Nathan's notebook. It wasn't just a random collection of thoughts, it was a map. Patterns began to emerge from the page's locations Nathan had been watching, places he returned to again and again. These weren't tourist spots, they were the city's underbelly. Downtown alleys, abandoned warehouses, and the shadowy side streets near Halsted. Each note felt like a frame in a movie, painting a chilling picture of someone being watched, someone being followed. Was Nathan the observer, or had he become the observed? By late afternoon, the sterile environment of the office was no longer enough. Simmons knew they had to walk the same paths Nathan had. She and her team hit the streets, retracing his steps in person. They explored every alley, checked every shuttered building, and climbed every rooftop they could get access to. A recent rain had washed the city, leaving the streets slick and wet. It made their task harder. Footprints were faint, and the shadows seemed to stretch, hiding more than they revealed. Then, a breakthrough. In one particularly grimy alley, tucked away behind a rusted dumpster, an officer found something small but significant, a torn piece of dark leather. Simmons examined it closely. It looked like it could have been from a briefcase, maybe even Nathan's. It was the first solid, tangible clue they'd found since he vanished. A small piece of his world left behind in the chaos. With this small victory fueling them, the team started canvassing the area, interviewing anyone who might have seen something. The city's nocturnal life began to offer up its secrets. A night shift janitor, weary from a long shift, recalled seeing a man in a nondescript gray jacket near that very same alley on the night Nathan disappeared. He wasn't alone. The janitor said the man was speaking to someone inside a black van. He described the van's presence as brief, almost fleeting. Would appear, an exchange would happen, and then it would be gone. The encounter seemed organized, almost rehearsed, like actors hitting their marks on a stage. Simmons meticulously logged every piece of testimony, her mind constantly cross-referencing it with the entries in Nathan's notebook. The puzzle pieces were scattered, but she could feel them starting to connect. Later that evening, another witness, a street vendor who had worked the same corner for years, added another layer to the mystery. He'd noticed a recurring pattern. A black van, matching the janitor's description, would often circle the block 3 times before finally parking near the alley. Each time, someone would get out, do a quick professional scan of the surroundings, and then melt back into the vehicle. It was as if they were mapping the streets, preparing the terrain, waiting for the perfect moment, or the perfect person. A chilling realization began to dawn on Simmons as she connected these sightings with Nathan's notes. His observations had been incredibly precise, almost unnaturally detailed for someone just casually jotting things down. He hadn't just been observing the city, he had noticed the patterns others had missed. He had seen the black van, he had noticed the strange, repeated movements. It became terrifyingly clear, Nathan knew he was being watched. He was aware that something was wrong long before he disappeared. He wasn't just a victim who stumbled into a bad situation. He was a player in a game he didn't fully understand, trying to figure out the rules before it was too late. As dusk settled, and the city lights began to blur on the wet pavement, the investigation kicked into high gear. This was no longer a passive review of evidence. Simmons deployed her officers, placing them in strategic, hidden locations near the alleys and streets that featured so prominently in Nathan's notebook. Their mission: to catch a glimpse of the phantom black van. They revisited surveillance footage from every possible camera in the vicinity, but the city's electronic eyes were failing them. Most cameras were outdated, broken, or pointed in the wrong direction. The few that worked provided only blurry, indistinct images, frustrating hints of movement, vague shadows playing tricks in the low light. Deep sense of unease settled over Detective Simmons. Nathan Cross hadn't just gotten lost. He had vanished into an environment that was teeming with observation and secrecy, a hidden world operating just beneath the surface of everyday life. Every clue they uncovered seemed to spawn to new questions. Whoever had taken him was methodical, careful, and always one step ahead. The longer Nathan remained missing, the more it felt like they were witnessing a masterfully executed plan unfold. By the time the long night shift drew to a close, the mood was somber. Simmons looked out at the sprawling city, its secrets held tight in the darkness. She knew this was no longer just a search for a missing person. It was a desperate race against an invisible clock, an urgent scramble to unravel a cold, calculated strategy hidden in plain sight on the streets of Chicago. The hunt was on, and the stakes were higher than ever. What do you think they'll find next? What was Nathan getting so close to? Let me know your theories in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching and being part of this investigation with us. If you're enjoying this series, please hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter. We'll see you in the next video. The following morning, Detective Simmons arrived at the precinct before the sun had even touched the Chicago skyline. The air was thick with the scent of stale coffee and the low hum of computer monitors. He pinned Nathan's notes to the corkboard, the scribbled street names and alleyway sketches forming a chaotic map of a hidden city. This wasn't just a missing persons case anymore. It was a puzzle, and Simmons was determined to find every last piece. He gathered his team, their faces a mixture of exhaustion and resolve. "All right, listen up," he began, his voice cutting through the morning quiet. "Nathan's notes are our only guide right now. We're going to put boots on the ground at every single location he marked down. I want stakeouts on every alley, every abandoned building, every forgotten street corner he mentioned. We need eyes everywhere." The officers dispersed, fanning out across the city like a dragnet. They settled into unmarked cars, peered from behind dumpsters, and watched from darkened windows. Every corner was scrutinized, every shadow observed with unwavering focus. But Chicago was a living, breathing beast, vast and relentless. The city's constant motion seemed to swallow every clue. The trail felt like smoke. Just as they thought they had a grasp on it, it would vanish into thin air, leaving them with nothing but the endless noise of traffic and the cold, indifferent stare of brick walls. Simmons felt a familiar frustration creeping in. It was like chasing a ghost through a maze. Back at the precinct, Simmons turned his attention to the growing file on the mysterious black van. The sightings were piling up, each one more tantalizing and frustrating than the last. He spread the reports across his desk, a mosaic of near misses. The van was a phantom, always in view, but never within reach, always a step ahead. One report in particular caught his eye. It was from a night shift delivery driver, a man who navigated the city's arteries while everyone else slept. He claimed to have seen the van parked near a desolate warehouse district. According to the driver's statement, 2 men had emerged from the vehicle. They were dressed in dark jackets and caps, their faces completely obscured by the deep shadows of the industrial night. They didn't speak a word, communicating instead through a series of subtle gestures and glances, a silent, unnerving ballet. They scanned the streets with a professional, almost military precision, their movements economical and purposeful. Then, as quickly as they had appeared, they slipped back into the van and drove off into the darkness, leaving the driver with an unshakable sense of unease. Simmons began mapping the sightings on a large, detailed map of the city, used different colored pins for each report, slowly connecting the dots. A pattern began to emerge from the chaos. The van wasn't moving randomly. It was tracing the same routes over and over again, almost like a predator patrolling its territory. Each circuitous path seemed to converge near specific alleys, the very same alleys that Nathan had meticulously noted in his journal. It was a chilling revelation. Nathan hadn't just been observing random locations. He had been tracking the movements of this van, unknowingly drawing a map that led right to his own disappearance. The purpose of these routes was still a mystery, but Simmons now knew the van was the key. Later that evening, just as the city lights began to blur through the rain-streaked windows of his office, Simmons's phone rang. The caller ID showed a local pawn shop, Second Chance Treasures. The owner, a man named Sal, sounded nervous. "Detective," he said. His voice rushed. "You told us to keep an eye out for anything unusual. A guy was just in here. He tried to sell a briefcase. Brown leather, brass clasps. It looked just like the one in the photo you showed me." Simmons's heart hammered against his ribs. It was the first solid lead, the first tangible link between Nathan and another person in this sprawling, anonymous city. "Did you buy it?" "Where is he now?" Simmons asked, already grabbing his coat. "No, I stalled him," Sal replied. "I told him I had to check the clasps in the back, but he got spooked. He just left, walked out the door a minute ago." By the time police units swarmed the pawn shop, the man was gone, vanished back into the city's labyrinthine streets. But he had left behind a crucial piece of the puzzle. Simmons immediately broadcasted a description of the man and the briefcase to all patrol units. "Monitor all pawn shops, back streets, bus stations, and train terminals. This guy is our first real link to Nathan. Do not let him slip away." The radio crackled to life as officers across the city confirmed the directive. A new sense of urgency pulsed through the force. They weren't just searching for a ghost anymore. They had a face, a direction. The city, however, seemed determined to work against them. The cacophony of Chicago, the distant wail of sirens, the rumble of the L train overhead, the endless chorus of car horns masked every potential clue. Footsteps were lost in the ambient noise. Muffled voices were swallowed by the wind whipping through the concrete canyons. As night deepened, casting long, menacing shadows across the slick pavement, a patrol unit called in a potential discovery. Near a secondary alley, one not far from the pawn shop, they'd found something. Partially hidden beneath a murky puddle, glistening under the beam of a flashlight, were unusual footprints. Simmons arrived on the scene within minutes. The forensics team was already at work, carefully documenting the area. The footprints were clear in the soft mud at the alley's edge. They measured the prints and the results sent a jolt through the detective. They were a perfect match for Nathan's shoe size. Even more telling were the fresh scuff marks surrounding the prints. The pattern suggested a struggle, a desperate, hurried movement. It looked like Nathan had been dragged, or at the very least, had been in a frantic hurry to get away from something, or someone. They scoured the area, but no other items were found. No dropped wallet, no stray buttons, just the footprints and the unsettling scuff marks. Still, it was progress. The trail, cold for so long, was finally heating up. By midnight, the tension in the streets of Chicago was a palpable force. The rain had stopped, but the air was still heavy with moisture, making the neon signs bleed into the wet pavement. The quiet hum of distant traffic was the only sound in the deserted alleys, creating an atmosphere thick with anticipation and dread. Simmons stood in the middle of the empty street, the city's glow painting the clouds a sickly orange. He knew they were close. The next breakthrough could come at any moment, a sudden radio call, or a chance sighting that would crack the case wide open. Or it could not come at all. He had to admit, whoever had taken Nathan was a professional. They were careful, deliberate, and seemed to possess an almost supernatural ability to remain one step ahead. Every move they made was calculated, leaving behind just enough to keep the police chasing their tail without ever giving up the game. This hunt had evolved. It was no longer just a search for a missing man. It had become a careful, painstaking unraveling of a hidden web, a criminal conspiracy that stretched its invisible threads across the entire city. With every new lead, every piece of the puzzle that snapped into place, Detective Simmons felt himself drawing closer to a truth that felt increasingly dangerous, a truth that was buried deep in the heart of his city, waiting to be unearthed. The night was far from over. Thank you so much for joining me on this leg of the investigation. The story is just getting started and the stakes are getting higher. If you're as hooked as I am and want to see how Detective Simmons unravels this mystery, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what happens next. We'll see you in the next chapter. On the sixth night after Nathan vanished, exhaustion weighed heavily on Detective Simmons and her team, but their resolve was unbreakable. The city felt like it was shrinking, the narrow alleys and dim streetlights creating a suffocating maze. The constant hum of traffic was a relentless reminder of the life that went on while one man's had stopped. Then, a breakthrough. An officer, eyes sharp despite the fatigue, spotted the black van. It was parked near a forgotten warehouse district, a ghost on the outskirts of downtown. Simmons and a small hand-picked team moved in, their footsteps swallowed by the shadows. The van sat silently, its dark windows reflecting the city's sparse light like vacant eyes. From their concealed vantage point, Simmons watched a figure emerge, a man in a gray jacket. He scanned the streets with a methodical precision that sent a chill down her spine. His steps were deliberate, almost rehearsed. Suddenly, every cryptic note in Nathan's journal clicked into place. The timing, the locations, the chilling pattern of surveillance. Nathan hadn't just been a victim. He'd been a witness to his own abduction. He had seen it all unfolding. The figure's head snapped towards a nearby alley. A flicker of movement. Simmons' heart hammered against her ribs. Was it Nathan? A desperate hope flared. Or was it someone else? Another piece of this maddening puzzle. They advanced, their movements cautious and fluid. But by the time they reached the alley, it was empty. The air was still, holding the ghost of a presence. All that remained were footprints, impressions in the damp ground leading toward a service entrance of a derelict building. The door was partially blocked by debris and framed by dark, oily puddles. It was a gateway into the city's underbelly. Inside, the scene was one of controlled chaos. Overturned crates, papers scattered like fallen leaves, and on the dusty floor, a single worn leather glove. It was Nathan's size. The air was thick with the scent of damp concrete and recent passage. He had been here. Whether by choice or by force, he had passed through this space. Another breadcrumb in a trail growing colder by the second. As they processed the scene, reports started trickling in from residents in the surrounding streets. Strange activity. Faint shouts carried on the wind. Sudden roar of a vehicle engine followed by screeching tires. Fleeting silhouettes melting back into the darkness. Simmons felt a growing dread. The abductor, or abductors, knew this city like the back of their hand. They were using its labyrinthian layout, its hidden passages, its perpetual motion as their greatest weapon. By the time the first hints of morning painted the sky, the search had yielded a handful of clues, but no solid answers. Nathan's briefcase, his invaluable notebook, his jacket, all were still missing, swallowed by the city's indifference. The neon signs, bleeding their colors onto the wet streets, seemed to mock their efforts. Chicago had taken him, and it wasn't ready to give him back. Simmons stood at the entrance of the abandoned warehouse, the cool morning air a stark contrast to the heat of the chase. The thrill of being close was now tinged with a profound sense of unease. This was no random act. This was a symphony of malevolence, orchestrated with terrifying precision, and they were only just beginning to hear the opening notes. As the city slowly began to wake, a new wave of determination washed over her. She stared into the sprawling urban landscape, a battlefield of concrete and steel, and whispered to the dawn a promise to the missing man. "We're close, Nathan. I can feel it." But she knew, deep down, that in the quiet, forgotten corners of Chicago, the shadows were still moving, holding tight to secrets that might never see the light of day. This investigation is far from over, and the truth is buried deeper than we could have ever imagined. If you want to follow Detective Simmons as she descends further into this conspiracy, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what happens next. Thanks for watching. Start with a suspenseful, investigative tone, 2 weeks. 14 days since Nathan Cross had seemingly been erased from the face of Chicago. The city held its breath, a collective anxiety hanging thick in the air. For Detective Simmons, this wasn't just another case file gathering dust. It was a personal mission. She was a bulldog, refusing to let the trail go cold. Every alley, every dimly lit street corner, every hesitant witness was revisited. Her team chased shadows, piecing together fragments of a puzzle that didn't seem to fit. The whispers of the black van continued. A ghostly presence reported here and there, but it was like trying to catch smoke. No license plate, no solid description. It was a phantom, designed to distract, to mislead. The case was stalling, the pressure mounting from the public and her superiors. Just as the hope began to dim, the kind of break detectives dream of landed right in their lap. A phone call. It was a local delivery driver, his voice a little shaky but his memory sharp. He'd made a delivery a few days prior, out on the industrial fringes of the city. The address was vague, just a warehouse number, and the recipient's name was a generic alias. But the driver remembered a face. He'd caught a glimpse of a man inside as the bay door rolled up. He wasn't sure at first, but after seeing Nathan Cross's face plastered on the news for days, a jolt of recognition hit him. It was him, he was certain. The man in the warehouse was the man the entire city was looking for. Simmons didn't waste a second. Adrenaline surged through her as she rallied a small, tactical team. No sirens, no grand entrance. This had to be quiet, precise. They converged on the warehouse, a monolithic block of corrugated metal under a gray, unforgiving sky. The air was still, the only sound the crunch of their boots on gravel. The driver's tip was their only lifeline. They had to assume the worst, that Nathan was a hostage, that his captors were armed and dangerous. The team breached the door, weapons drawn, fanning out into the cavernous space. But the scene that greeted them was bizarre. It defied every expectation. There was no struggle, no signs of a violent kidnapping. In the center of the vast, dusty floor, bathed in the cold light from a single overhead bulb, sat Nathan Cross. He was at a simple metal table, looking up at them, blinking. He was alive. He was physically unharmed. Disoriented, yes, but alert. His eyes, though tired, were as sharp as ever. The scene was surreal. Surrounding him weren't chains or restraints, but stacks upon stacks of papers, notebooks, and hand-drawn maps. Everything was meticulously organized, a testament to Nathan's methodical nature. As Simmons cautiously approached, Nathan began to speak, his voice steady despite the ordeal. He explained that he hadn't been randomly abducted. His obsessive observations of Halsted Street, the very thing that made him seem peculiar to some, had made him a target for others. A sophisticated criminal group had noticed his patterns, his uncanny ability to see the city's hidden rhythms. They saw him not as a victim, but as a potential asset. They didn't want to harm him. They wanted to use his unique mind. Their plan was audacious. They coerced him into becoming their unwilling cartographer. His task was to map the city's nocturnal pulse, the quiet alleys, the unmonitored traffic flows, the blind spots in surveillance. They were building a blueprint for their illicit operations, using Nathan's brain as their primary tool. He described his captivity as strangely civil. They had monitored him around the clock, but never laid a hand on him. They provided food, water, and all the materials he needed for his work. They underestimated him, though. They saw his calm demeanor as compliance, but it was a mask. Behind his quiet focus, Nathan was doing what he did best, observing. He wasn't just mapping for them, he was mapping them. Every conversation he overheard, every face he saw, every detail of their operation was secretly recorded in his notebooks, hidden in plain sight amongst the assigned work. He had turned his prison into an intelligence-gathering operation. His calm composure and sharp memory allowed him to catalog everything. The information he had gathered was a goldmine. It was the very evidence the police needed to dismantle the entire network. While Simmons' team secured the warehouse and arrested the handful of operatives who were present, they also recovered Nathan's personal belongings. The truth about the infamous black van finally came to light. It was a decoy, a cheap rental abandoned at various points across the city to create a narrative of a mysterious, ghost-like kidnapper. It was a red herring designed to send the police on a wild goose chase, while the real work was happening quietly in this forgotten warehouse. Nathan's return to his apartment was a media spectacle, albeit a brief one. Flanked by officers, he looked shaken but relieved. He spoke to the swarm of reporters, choosing his words with immense care. He gave them a story, but not the whole story. He couldn't reveal the depth of the criminal underworld he had just glimpsed. The full details were for Simmons' report, not for the 6 o'clock news. Slowly, Chicago exhaled. The city's frantic rhythm began to return to normal. The missing posters came down, and the news cycle moved on. But for those who had followed the case, a lingering unease remained. Detective Simmons filed her final report, closing the case. It was a success, a resolution, but it wasn't a clean, happy ending. It was a story with jagged edges. Nathan Cross had survived, not through force, but through intellect. He had stared into a hidden, darker side of Chicago and returned, but a piece of that darkness would forever be imprinted on his mind. The streets of Chicago were quiet once more, but for anyone walking down Halsted Street at night, the shadows might seem a little deeper now. A subtle reminder that even the most ordinary city corners can hold extraordinary secrets, and that sometimes survival isn't about fighting back. It's about seeing what others miss, having the patience to wait for your moment, and maybe just a little bit of luck. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible story. If you found this case as fascinating as I did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the world's most compelling mysteries. See you in the next video.